Well, thank you for joining us today. My name is Barb Kaba.
Yes.
I am a fourth-generation family farmer from Adair County, and I'm chair of the Iowa CCI Action Fund. So thank you for coming today. As you may know, CCI Action Fund is a statewide people-powered group with members in 99 of Iowa's 99 counties. Our group has people of all ages, all races, and all backgrounds. Our goal is to take on corporate power in all its forms. Among other things, we fight for clean water, climate justice, racial justice, living wages, fair immigration policies, and health care for all. To make real change in everyday people's lives on these issues, we know that we have to change business as usual politics. We must do politics differently to make life more just and small d democrat for people like us. To that end, we have formed this committee to decide if there is a like-minded candidate who we should endorse in the gubernatorial race. Our endorsement process has three main parts. First, we ask candidates, including you, to fill out our issue questionnaire, which you did. Our endorsement process then moves to inviting selected candidates in for screenings, just like this one. And next, we will be surveying our members to find out what issues they care about and which candidate they prefer. And once we complete all three parts of this process, this committee will make an endorsement decision, and we won't necessarily endorse. But should the committee and the CCI Action Board decide to endorse, this will become more than just an endorsement on paper. We will put feet in the street. We will make phone calls, we will knock on doors to get out the vote. And after the election, we will make sure that our candidate governs as they campaign. We have a number of prepared questions today that will be asked by different members of this committee here today. Please keep your answer to 3 minutes or less.
Sure.
So let's get started.
Great.
And I have the first one.
Sure.
In 3 minutes or less, who are you and why are you running for governor?
Well, I usually start out answering that question, or a stump speech routine. We're talking about how I came to Iowa 43 years ago to go to college from New York, and many of you can tell that I'm still working on my Iowa accent, and I married a fifth-generation Iowan, and whose father was a Maytag worker, proud UAW member, and that sort of thing. But frankly, that doesn't really talk about why I'm running or my passion on the issues. And you folks are definitely among the most issue-oriented people in the Democratic Party. So I'm going to, go light on that thing in terms of background. I would say, though, because of my 15 years with a nonpartisan legislative fiscal bureau, now called Legislative Services Agency, and Iowa Department of Human Services a similar amount of time, and also being president of the Des Moines School Board, and I'm a school board and an activist with school issues for a long time, and neighborhood groups. I would say my knowledge of Iowa government is second to nobody in this field. But the reason I'm running is quite honestly described really well by what you just read, and very honestly by what happened a year ago, a little more than a year ago. I started out with the Sanders campaign. I wouldn't be running if Bernie had not tied. I mean, be honest about it. I am way too experienced in politics and way too cynical about the process to know that I would not have a chance if we did not see what happened with Bernie's campaign. I'm running a very different sort of campaign. I've put a limit of $500 on donations per person. I don't think you can say you want to get big money out of politics unless you walk the talk, whatever you want to use. I am really more about big change than specific issues. Specific issues are important, no doubt. But really what happens so often is we start parsing out differences on specific issues. And I think as a whole, progressives and Democrats have somehow lost sight of the big fight we have. And the Republicans and the conservatives, quite honestly, are doing a better job at that. They have a long game. They have long-term goals. We worry lots about specific issues, notwithstanding a wonderful summary that you just read. But that is not the dominant thread in Democratic politics. We worry about surviving and fighting back, which is all tremendously important. But we somehow don't move forward in our agenda as much as they are. And I think we have to change that. And I think that's something I bring to the table, and we'll talk more about it. I don't want to go over the 3 minutes. But I have a great deal of passion for it, as you can tell by my comments about it. We really need to not just struggle to reverse what the Republicans have done, not just struggle to make small incremental process, but we need to put bigger things on the table. We need to really embrace the idea that we all do better when we all do better. Credit to Paul Wellstone, somebody else who ran for state auditor, a little known fact, somebody who first ran for state auditor in Minnesota and lost. Like I ran for state auditor in Iowa and lost, and then went on to other things. That's 23 minutes, I'll stop there.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Pat Bowen, and I'm from Iowa City, and also a longtime member of CCI Action Fund. And my question for you today is, what values motivate you, and what is the core message of your campaign?
The core message, I'll start with that first. The system is rigged. The political, economic, and legal system. I think sometimes we forget about the legal side of things. I'm a lawyer, so I don't forget about it. The system is rigged against people in favor of people with money against people who don't have it. People with education against people who don't have it. And this can go on from there. But the system is rigged. We can fix it. We have the power to fix it. It is not something we can't do. We all do better when we all do better is really a very key thing, because that really is the opposite of what we are fighting against. So I would say those two things really summarize it. What was the first one? I'm sorry, I got.
What values?
Well, lots of things you have on your sign. Walking in here, I saw all those wonderful things posted there. What values is a real democratic approach to policy making and decision making, small d. A very grassroots based process. I will govern, knock on wood, I will govern with a very different process than has ever been used before. I will spend little time in Des Moines and lots of time out around the state and in Des Moines talking to folks, to people who live here, about what we want Iowa to be and the problems involved in getting there. I think too often politicians don't give voters enough credit that they can understand the complex issues. I worked in the legislature for 15 years. I know an awful lot of politicians don't believe voters can follow complex issues. That is opposite to what I have found when I have traveled around the state, both during my run for state auditor and more recently. People can figure things out. People understand these are hard issues. So a very decentralized approach to decision making, or decentralized approach to decision making, but also involving people to a much higher degree than we've ever done before. I don't know if I was ready for it. I'll be honest about it. I mean, I'm going to be talking about that as much as policy issues. And I don't know if people want to do that because it's a lot of work. I think they do. We'll see.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is
Morning.
Nick Shute from Alden, Iowa, up there in Hardin County country.
Yep.
Family farmers are being driven out of business and small towns like mine are dying. What's your vision for rural Iowa?
Well, the same really in many ways as for urban Iowa, in that what we have going for us is wonderful natural resources and a really, really wonderful workforce. And we aren't doing enough to preserve and help either one. There's probably a better word than help, but I'm not getting it right now, but to foster either one, develop either one. Companies move to Iowa not because of low taxes or giveaways, corporate welfare. They move to Iowa because of the workforce, hardworking and well educated, and we're letting that go downhill. They come to Iowa because we have good infrastructure, and we're letting that go downhill. We need to do a lot more, including the internet, to make sure rural Iowa has good infrastructure. And they come to Iowa, well, the economic development is in Iowa because of the wonderful resources we have, and we're not doing enough to preserve that. We need a much more aggressive program to help farmers preserve the land. Right now, the economics are such that farmers have little choice but to try and squeeze every dollar out of every acre. I think with some new policies and facilities for making money available for conservation, for longer-term sustainable agriculture, we can help the local economies and also preserve our resources.
Okay, you talked a lot about resources, water being one of the main resources. Are you going to have a plan for working on our water?
Yes, and I'll be the first one to say I am no expert on environmental quality. Obviously, my academic background and my experience are in different areas than that. And in terms of priorities and values, that is incredibly high. We have a public health crisis on water, nothing short of that. And it's going to get worse, not better, unless we change significantly what we're doing. I like the idea of a moratorium on hog lots, but that alone doesn't do it. And also having local site control. So, it gets very complicated and very technical in terms of what things to do most effectively. Cover crops are great. It sounds good as a phrase, but cover crops work better for certain kinds of crops. If you do corn sequentially, cover crops don't work so well. You shouldn't be doing corn sequentially, people do. So it gets really technical. We need to, though, prioritize that and say we are going to have metrics and timetables for cleaning up our water. We have to do it in a way that is technically feasible because there are variances in nitrates, let's say, that have nothing to do with practices. We have to be scientifically based. But we have to have timetables and specific goals. And we also, I think, have to make pollution economically unsustainable. There's a lot of discussion about the 3/8 cent, for using the 3/8 cent sales tax for cleaning up our water. I'm very wary about that because, generally speaking, from an economics point of view, you want to make the folks who are doing something that is bad pay the cost of fixing it. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to stop. If the cost of fixing that problem is spread among everybody, you have a real problem in changing behavior.
Okay. Move on to Caleb.
Hi, my name is Caleb Van Fossen. I was a student at Iowa State University, but I'm currently unable to go back because of the crushing cost of higher education. In your questionnaire response, you said you were hesitant to support tuition-free universities.
Right.
I was wondering if you acknowledge that student debt in this country is a crisis that has an entire generation of Iowans trapped in debt and poverty. And if you could tell me what you think the price of college tuition should be in the state of Iowa. Also, what would it take to get you on board with tuition-free college?
Let me clarify right there. Like, that was a financial aid director. So I have kind of a bias in terms of and I have an issue. Tuition-free would mean that we are giving up a whole lot of federal money. Because if there's no tuition, it causes all kinds of problems with getting various federal grants and outside money to come in. Okay, work-study program. Yes, you can. It might still be okay to do that because of the cost of living. I'm in favor of debt-free college. Okay, I don't think students should graduate with crushing debt. I'm not saying totally debt-free, but it should be thousands, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands like we have now. I'm in favor of debt-free college. I'm wary about simply taking tuition down to zero because I think we'll wind up as a state. It's a budget analyst wonk in me worrying about what it would do to federal funding. Okay, but in terms of value, post-secondary education needs to be accessible to everyone. Okay, as far as a appropriate, I don't have a number for what the tuition should be. It should be such that students can graduate without debt. So it varies depending on what the Pell Grant numbers are, what work study is. I think it's good lots of times for students to have jobs. Some of the most interesting and useful jobs that students have that really round out their education and give them a good resume line, quite frankly, are often work study jobs. So you don't want to, it gets very complicated and very delicate then. I mean, it's not the kind of thing you really can just say in a throwaway line. Make it free for everybody and not worry about the consequences. But students should graduate without debt, and post-secondary should be available to everyone. Was there something in there I did not address?
And also, I was wondering if you acknowledge it as like a crisis.
Oh, it's absolutely a crisis. People are leaving Iowa because they can't afford, they can't get jobs that pay enough to service their debt. No, it's absolutely a crisis. All around Iowa, people can't buy houses because they have a high student loan debt. No, it is unquestionably a crisis.
Okay.
And in terms of specifics, I mean, I would put $100 million, and I'm a budget person, okay, so I tend to think in terms of budgets, all right, that's how I've lived most of my adult life, is worrying about government budgets. I would put $100 million towards reducing tuition, and $50 million towards buying down debt of people who have already graduated. Where does it come from? Tax breaks for corporations, cutting back on those. I think it's a lot more effective in terms of helping corporations have an educated workforce.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Neiderbach. My name's Jack. I'm a CCI member from Clive. If elected, are you willing to co-govern with CCI Action and other people-powered groups? And when we say that, we mean having a meaningful seat at the table, having access. So when we call you, answer the phone, or when you need us, you call here. And being consulted and having input on policy and issues where we are definitely the experts.
The short answer is yes. As I described, my concept of governing is a very, very grassroots one, so that fits very well with it. I know in the past, when I've needed expertise on topics, when I was running for state auditor, I sat down, and in fact, frankly, this past spring, I sat down with CCI staff and gotten some coaching on the capital issue and the master matrix. I think that was a topic which can get pretty technical pretty quick. No, of course, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of CCI. In terms of expertise, there is no organization more effective in fighting for social change in Iowa. Yes. Without turning into a gushing CCI. I mean, I'm forgetting who it was, but somebody called me up in the spring and asked me for a donation. And I said, yeah, put me up 25. And then I sat there for a minute after I did that, and I called him back, and I said, that's absurd. I can't think of anybody else, with the possible exception of the ACLU, on the same level. But I'm more confident in, then CCI put me up for 100. And at the conference, at the conference I did it at $10 a month. No, there's no, again, ACLU and CCI are capital. And you always return calls as opposed to the ACLU I love, they're not staffed, Iowa ACLU, Iowa Civil Liberties Union is not staffed to always return calls, so.
And could you list maybe 3 brief examples of what that relationship would look like?
Well, calling people up for expertise. I mean, as a practical matter, when, knock on wood, I'm governor, I mean, I may not directly call up. I would probably have a policy person working in that area call up, most likely, but I would certainly be open to communication. So tapping for expertise and perspective and wisdom and values. Organizing a lot of the grassroots efforts that I envision my governorship having around the state. Certainly CCI would be a full partner. For instance, Governor Cover, I think at one point had SPPG, State Public Policy Group, organizing those sort of things. I'd be more comfortable with CCI doing it. SPPG is great, but actually we're in a different place now. They do different things. And third. Well, the annual convention, for one. I would certainly always come to the annual convention. It's one of the best political events. It is the best political event in the state. The Democratic Party had conventions like that. They'd have a lot better turnout.
Tom?
My name's Tom Rendon. I live here in Iowa. I'm an Iowa CCI Action member. And do you believe that you have a realistic chance of winning the nomination?
Absolutely.
So what is your plan to win?
I think I have a realistic chance of not only winning the nomination of being the next governor. I would not be doing this. I have done politics. I have tilted at windmills way too many times. And I am, I'll be 61 next few days, September 7th. So I'll be 61 soon. There are other things I'll be putting my efforts in.
What's your plan to win?
The specifics are, the people, well, as I said before, I would not be doing this if I did not see Bernie basically dying, almost winning. Putting the Bernie folks and folks who are in favor of legalizing cannabis together into a winning number for the nomination. Now, obviously, nobody knows exactly how many people are going to vote. 151 voted, 1,000 voted in 06, but we have a lot more candidates, probably a higher turnout, everybody's fired up. So trying to come up with a winning number, which is what everybody tells you to do, is problematic. Because I think we're looking at times different than previous times. But I think that is a winning strategy for winning the nomination.
But what about the other candidates who also are saying, yeah.
But nobody else is for cannabis.
Nobody else is what?
Nobody else supports legalization of marijuana.
But I'm saying, you were saying that one of the ways you were going to win was by getting the Bernie coalition on your side, and I'm saying other people may be getting that too.
Well,
why are they going to support you over those other candidates?
Well, I won't be getting 100% of it, I'm sure. I mean, obviously. I think my approach, I won't say platform as much as it is my overall approach, talking about how we need to look at the big picture and look at the rigged system, not just the specific issues, will, over time, and I think that will appeal to a very significant, adequate number of Bernie supporters. If you go to some of these events around the state, you'd think the election was in November. People are very fired up. People are, feeling very, very excited about it all. This is a long campaign ahead of us. We have 9+ months ahead of us. As the only person in the field who has gone through a statewide campaign before, this is something that's gonna, people take their time to decide. I think anybody who picks a candidate right now will probably go back and forth 2 times before election day. Right now, I am probably very, very low in the polls. frankly, I suppose are useless right now because name recognition among all the candidates is so low. But I think my approach, my thoughtful conversational style, frankly, I think how I come across to people, my, for lack of a better word, what's been described to me as authenticity, I wear my heart on my sleeve, will be appealing to Iowans. You look at what has worked with other politicians in Iowa, I think I have a lot of those qualities. I mean, we all don't like Terry Branstad, but he was not a fiery speaker. He was a bad speaker. I mean, I used to sit, in the legislative staff, hear his State of the Union speech, and I would say, State of State speech, and I would think, he's gotten worse. And, so how can somebody get worse? But, there are certainly many people who are better speakers than I am. Well, there are some people who are better speakers than I am in the field. No argument there. I don't think that's what Iowans are looking for. I think Iowans are looking for people who are thoughtful, who know their stuff, who come across genuine, authentic, and care about them. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but anything you want to follow me? Is there a follow-up?
Okay. We'll move forward then, and who has the next question?
Sheree.
Oh.
Written down, Marjorie.
We're already there.
Oh, this.
That's
Okay,
great.
Good.
Okay. John, thanks again for coming. I know that you're well aware that in the last legislative session, we battled against the bill to dismantle Des Moines Waterworks,
Yes.
which we quickly recognized as retribution for the lawsuit that they filed against the drainage districts north of Des Moines. We know that protecting independent water utilities, not just in Des Moines, but across the state, will continue to be an issue because other utilities came to that public hearing and they felt very threatened by that bill also. What is your perspective on the attempt to dismantle independent utilities and hand over control to local politicians?
I'm not sure the current control is as apolitical as the question presupposes. I mean, it is the mayor who appoints the board for Des Moines Waterworks.
Right.
Okay, so it isn't as if, I think it is important to keep utilities, key things like that, out of the political sphere as much as possible. That said, I think the writing is on the wall. We're going to have a more regional approach for water in central Iowa. And I don't think that's necessarily bad.
Yeah.
That's-
I guess my question, just to put a finer point on it,
Please.
would be that certainly we need to make sure that our customers in the suburbs that we're meeting their water needs.
Yeah.
And certainly they need to have a seat at the table, which essentially there's already a regional committee that Des Moines Waterworks. But the ultimate goal of this bill was to dismantle Des Moines Waterworks, go to a regionalized plan, but strip Des Moines Waterworks of their authority and leadership.
Yeah.
That's where my concern is.
Well, but the plan was not thought out well. Maybe it was just dumb. I mean, there's no way to say it because it didn't figure out what was going to happen with the rates in the suburbs that would have to be paid to compensate Des Moines for all the resources they were giving up. I mean, there were so many flaws of that bill. It wasn't even it was clearly a political retribution bill.
Yeah.
For filing the lawsuit. I mean, obviously, and I think, frankly, even Republican leadership realized that, and they also realized that they were headed towards a possible train wreck in central Iowa, let's say, with rates going up, and they had no idea how much they were going to go up, and the suburban voters would get very mad.
So in a
they tried to
regional-
play that with them. In a larger picture, you need an independent. And frankly, I'd love to see it with electricity too. I went to law school in Oregon where you have lots of independent utilities producing electricity. In some places in Iowa you have that. But I'd like to see utilities run by independent boards that focus on what is good for their consumers and are sheltered from politics. Exactly how we get there. And then also have a regional approach because these things are all regional in terms of scope. How we get there from where we are, if I was proposing something, I would say you want a commission or a committee looking at that for a year that is thoughtful and not involved in the lawsuit politics, and just technically look at how to structure, how to reform. It's kind of like how we have done with certain educational services in Iowa, the AEAs. They were a mishmash of educational services, and they had a process to get things in a reasonably thoughtful, well-structured manner, and that's what we need to do. Does that get to where you're going?
Yeah, I guess the concern was that the ultimate goal of regionalization was to strip Des Moines Waterworks of their authority. And I don't think that Des Moines Waterworks is opposed to a regionalized,
No, I don't think they are either.
but they also need to be in the driver's seat because they are the experts.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
And John, my name's Sherry Hawk, and I'm from Ankeny. And concerning the $15 minimum wage, I'm certain that you've heard the concerns from small business owners, particularly in rural Iowa, wondering how in the world they would be able to pay their employees. What would your response be to those small business owners concerned about the $15 minimum wage?
Well, I guess first, let me start off by saying I'm in favor of raising to $15 now and indexing for inflation. We've talked about this for a lot of years. I mean, in some ways, we've already delayed it. People are talking about delaying it until 2024. We've already delayed this many years. This was first talked about years ago, and there's been a lot of inflation since then. So $15 now is not the same as $15 then. And the other issue is, what is small business? A more graduated phase-in for very small business might be needed. You don't want to have a huge shock. You may want to do it over a year or two. I think what you do is try and address that with tax policy. You say everybody has a minimum wage of $15 an hour. I don't think workers should have to subsidize those companies. Perhaps if there's really well-documented evidence that this is an undue burden upon particularly rural small business, you can address that with tax policy. But it shouldn't be based on workers. I'm in favor of $15 now. Is that address what you were looking for?
Pretty much. Small, like Clary in Iowa, someone who owns a restaurant and they're barely surviving with what they're paying their workers, and that's a complaint I've heard, or a concern I've heard.
Oh.
And so
Let's give them some of these tax breaks that we're giving to Apple and Google. No, I mean, of course. And I go to small towns all the time and eat in the cafes. I can't imagine what the margin is. It's pretty tight. I mean, frankly, I suspect a lot of them are losing money, and it's a job for the owners more than it really is a business. You know what I'm saying? It's what they do when they're making any money, as opposed to when they could be working somewhere else. I have my doubts. So you have to do something. But we obviously have no problem helping folks out who need it, or we're helping folks out who don't need it currently. Let's help folks out who need it, but it shouldn't be done on the backs of workers, which is what currently you're doing.
thank you.
Yeah, my name's Larry Ginner, I'm a third-generation family farmer, and I explored a little bit more about agriculture with you. Farmers are caught in a cost-price squeeze today.
Very much.
So, would you support, if you support $15 an hour, would you support a price floor for cash grains? Would you support supply management for cash grains? And would you support a grain reserve? I got a couple other things here, but those three things.
The short answer is yes, yes, and yes, if there is legal authority to do that. I'm not aware of any states do that currently, but I'm not by a long shot an agricultural policy expert. I would If any states do that, I suspect that we wind up in court.
It is,
I want to make sure it's, supported by federal,
it's on the books.
it's on the books.
Yes.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
Yes.
If it's on the books, I'm happy.
It's historical. Now, I realize you're governor. The point I'm making here is, would you stand up there and say, family farmers are in a cost price squeeze? They need a price floor, just like we need $15 an hour minimum wage.
Yes.
We need supply management for good conservation, and we need a grain reserve for bad times and good times.
Yes. Those are all good policies, yes.
Right.
But I think there are other things too that need to be done.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yes, okay, yes. That isn't the only one, yes.
Would you like to expand on that? You have a couple of minutes.
Well, I mean, just in terms of financing, North Dakota has a state bank, but among other things they use for agriculture. But it makes money, relatively low interest money available to ag folks for various things. Particularly, I think we need to make money available for conservation.
Well, when I follow up here,
And it doesn't actually conflict with what
the
you're...
price floor, just like $15 an hour minimum wage, the price floor would take care of all that. Understand?
Yeah.
That's money in the farmer's pocket that will be going out of the farmer's pocket into the larger community.
Right. The only thing I'm worried about is how it is going to impact the demand for crops that have a price floor. I mean, I'm rapidly running out of my knowledge base here, okay? But if you put a price floor on something, I want to make sure you're able to sell the crops. Because if other people overseas, let's say, make it available at a lower price,
Well, see,
I'm for it as a policy. I just want to make sure they have the ability also to borrow money for efficiencies and also for conservation. Well, I'm absolutely for that.
you just don't allow it to come in cheaper than what we produce it, like on everything.
Right,
We
that's
don't
better.
dump our grain and destroy other farmers. So it has to have it has to be an international scope.
Of course, that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
You said it better.
We can work with you on that.
For in terms of values, I have no agricultural
Well,
policy.
this is a federal policy. The idea for you to get up there and start saying the language, farmers are caught in a cost price squeeze, they need a fair price for their products. Workers are in a cost price squeeze, they need $15 an hour.
There's a whole interesting angle to it too, and also that is the monopoly involved in the seed.
Right.
Yeah.
That really has a lot of things.
Exactly.
You'll probably, I don't know, you're not going to be congressional candidates, right? Austin Friedrichs is a real knowledgeable guy on that. I would defer to he's running for Congress, and on that topic, he's an expert. So there really is a big problem with that whole topic too. And frankly, I think that is something we probably could do as a state. We often let feds do the monopoly investigation, and the state has a lot of authority too, as Tom Miller has shown. So that is something hopefully he will take up, and I will both before and after the election encourage him to do that.
Thank you.
Susie. Tom, my name is Susie Petra,
Sure.
and I am from Ames, Iowa. I was very, very happy to see in your written statement that you talked about a state bank. That happens to be the platform I introduced.
Oh, okay.
And I would be very happy if you would explain how all Iowans could benefit from a state bank.
Well, it depends on the scope. I have to tell you that we're going to have a big learning curve on that, because that's an issue I've brought up a bunch of times, and frankly, clearly, most people it's out of their range of, we're not even thinking about it at all, okay? When you give me a talk, you can tell pretty well what people nod their heads to, and frankly, in most parts of Iowa, a state bank is off their radar. It has lots of possibilities. One is lending for, right off the top, lending for ag conservation practices, and also allowing to purchase new equipment if they can't get private financing secured by the land. So the risk to the state is really minimal, okay? Lending for homeowners to move into renewable energy possibilities. There's only one way of doing it. There are lots of opportunities for renewable energy, and lots of issues that have to be interconnectivity issues and things like that need to be addressed. But that is certainly something that could be looked at. There are some places that have a big push for renewable energy for homeowners, and people are getting gouged by some of the lending that's going on there. That I want to make sure that doesn't happen. So they're definitely there. And quite frankly, I'd like to see it. It would be great if we had a federal administration that would be more friendly to this. But there are so many people who are unbanked. And now North Dakota doesn't do this. They stay out of that sort of thing. The only way you can have a consumer account at a North Dakota state bank is if you physically go there. But maybe working this with some credit unions or whatever else, so that every person can have a low-cost access to banking services. I'm not sure a bank account is right to everybody, but making sure banking services are available. So it also goes to the whole idea of micro-lending and accumulation of resources, having a place for people to slowly accumulate resources, which ISED did. But anyway, so there's all kinds of possibilities to make it up to. The core things would be ag and homeowner renewable energy.
So it
Not just homeowner renewable energy.
benefits Iowa taxpayers because the money goes back into Iowa.
Yeah, the spending is in Iowa, and quite frankly, my understanding is the Bank of North Dakota makes money.
Yes, it does.
So, I mean, it isn't like it's a loss. This isn't a line item expenditure. I mean, it's not a benefit. It's separate from the state general fund in terms of the revenue stays in the bank. But
Thank you.
Very good. Michael?
Yes. John.
Hi.
Welcome. In your statement in the questionnaire, you say that you support universal coverage, single-payer health insurance.
Absolutely.
And but then you go on to say you talk about it as eliminating profit and overpaid management salaries in favor of broad coverage and benefits and affordable premiums. And then you go on to describe, Medicaid, using Medicaid in terms of allowing more access to Medicaid and through businesses buying into it and other things. Which it confused me because it does not sound like single payer. What you're talking about. And I guess my question is, I'd like some clarification on this.
Of course, I reread my response this morning. Why? I must have confused everybody.
Yeah, but I think it's really two parts. Do you support HR 676, the National Improvement in Care for All? And as governor, what would you do to help make this happen? Because it is a federal thing.
Right.
And then also on a state level, what would you do? What could you do to?
Well, on the federal level, and what the governor can do to try and build support for it, I think it's really important. I will be a bully pulpit governor. I will not be somebody who sits in Des Moines and does not go out there and talk about what changes are needed just because it happens to be federal. We have a fair amount of influence on the federal sphere, not just because we have 6 legislators, but also because we're Iowa and go first. So far, not going to win. So I would be somebody who would be very, very outspoken advocating for single-payer universal coverage. On a national level, I also think depending on what happens at the elections in 2018, if that isn't in the imminent cards, I think there are other ways of doing it on a regional or amalgamation of states, a coalition of willing, as you will, of states that are interested in this. They don't have to be physically contiguous, but trying to get states to go in to have enough insured lives to put together a state-based single-payer health insurance. That gets real interesting in terms of what's going to happen legally on that. I don't think anybody really knows what the boundaries will be. California, of course, may well be the first one to try it, but California is a country. You know, my parents lived out there from 74 on, so I spent a lot of time visiting in California. It's a country, but because it works there doesn't mean it'll work other places. We would have to go in with other states to make it work. Okay, so yes, I'm all for that. I'm for the federal bill. Hopefully at the federal level I've clarified. On the state level, there obviously should have been a transitional sentence or two, a short term. You know, there's this proposal put together by Matt McCoy, John Forbes, and Jack Hatch, talking about Medicaid and expanding it, letting everybody buy into it. That's a good start. I like also letting companies buy into it. Let's go head to head with insurance companies.
Yay.
Let's put the competition on them and say, can we do it cheaper?
As a public option.
As a public option. So that would be the affordable, that goes to the second part of my response, and I apologize not having the transitional sentence there explaining that. But I don't think that proposal goes nearly far enough. And it's kind of my general critique of how the Democratic Party looks at things. We don't go far enough. We don't actually take the risk of challenging the corporate sphere. And very honestly, they give an awful lot of money. You know, the insurance companies give a lot of money to legislators, including Democrats. I'll stop that part of that, but I could get more caustic. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. But no, I'm absolutely for the long term of single payer, universal coverage, and the short term, the immediate short term, as in first year of administration short term, of making Medicare, well, making Medicaid available to everyone, including businesses. I mean, it's basically, you know, it's interesting. The Medicare for all is a phrase which has a lot of, I mean, it works in a lot of ways because Medicare is such a positive vibe. You don't find a lot of folks who are Medicare who don't love it. But it is not really the most applicable thing in some ways because it confuses people a little bit too. I'm going to be on Simon Connolly on Tuesday talking about Medicare for all. That will be interesting. I'm not someone who shies away from the lion's den. He told me when he called me, he said, I really respect you, John, because you say what you think. Yeah, thanks. You're going to tear me apart. You're going to try and tear me apart. I think it'll go well because Medicare is loved. Social Security is loved. All we're doing is talking about taking Medicare as a pilot program. Expanding it. I mean, in concept. I don't think we're going to talk about, details. I'm sorry, I'm messing up the time.
No, you don't. You're about right on your phone.
Okay.
All right.
My turn. My name is Kim Bowen. I'm from Iowa City. I've been a member of Iowa CCI Action Fund, and I'm also on the board of directors for the Action Fund. And my question to you, sir, what is your plan to restore collective bargaining for public employees? Our last legislature butchered that, and it was poorly received by a lot of people. What is your plan to restore?
Well, the short response is I think we need to reinstate all the things that were taken out. All the things, just totally repeal that section of that bill. I'm not going to say Chapter 20 was perfect. There's always room for tinkering in any piece of legislation. But as somebody who has sat on both sides of the table, as management as a school board member, which was a little interesting, but as management as a school board member, and of course, I was active. I was in a bargaining team, but I was active in AFSCME for many years. It worked well. Everybody was happy with it. The per board did a good job. Yes, the arbitrators did a good job. Sometimes people were a little fussy about paying for what the arbitrator said, like Terry Branstad wound up in court. But overall, it was a pretty smooth process, vast majority of the time. So we need to go back to that. In terms of how to get there, I think it's a time bomb. It may not be a public health crisis like water, but it is a time bomb because we have a huge number of retirements, particularly in the education field, but overall, of public employees coming up. Baby boomers are getting older, as well myself. And if we don't make public employment attractive, we're gonna have a real problem finding people to work there. And I don't think people really thought that through very well, particularly when it comes to education. So I think once people reflect upon it, there may be a little bit of buyer's remorse on that. They were locked in. Republicans were locked in. I'm not defending them, but they had made campaign promises, and the first time they had an agenda, they had the power, they were going to do that. And I think they felt I think there were Republicans who thought they were going politically too far, but they were because of the campaign finance system. In the spot. I'm not defending them. I'm just saying there was some of that going on. I told the Iowa Federation of Labor, and I will stick to it, I will not sign the budget bills until we fix this problem. This is a must-do. Because again, it's going to mess up. It's going to mess up Iowa education. We can't afford to have teachers going off to Minnesota, Wisconsin. Minnesota, Illinois, Minnesota, Illinois, Nebraska. Lots of our urban areas are on the war. So. It is a very high priority.
And to follow up on that without getting carried away, I assume that you would not sign any legislation that basically destroys diapers if you were governor.
As somebody who receives diapers. My wife would be. No, I totally would not. I mean, I have said and frankly, I think because of the recent news that came out with the rate of return, the pressure to do that is going to be a different context now than it was a week or two ago when everybody was running around as if the sky was falling, which it's not. But people were running around with that. But now because the rate of return was so good, I think that's going to take wind out of that sail. But Diapers works. Yes, we have to probably raise the contribution rates, but existing law provides for that to happen automatically. Long term, I think we need to look at whether or not a system that focuses on long-term employment works with our young people who may have some different attitudes about how they relate to the workforce. There's a lot more moving around going on now.
Right.
So we may have to look at that, but that's part of a bigger picture of pension discussion, discussing pensions. And we can't say automatically there won't be any changes in diapers in the next 25 years because it may not fit the workforce. But it should be addressing a problem, not ideologically driven. And that really, frankly, is true about, before you asked about what my governing values were, really, in a lot of ways, that's my overall passion that has led me to be in government, is that too often we do things for ideology, not practical reasons or science or economics.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good job. And we're almost out of time, as you can see by the clock. But I have one more question for you. In one or two sentences, why do you want our endorsement?
Well, I've actually said it. We're ready. Because CCI is the single most effective progressive organization in the state of Iowa. That's one thing. And because it would be helpful in terms of sending a signal to progressives around the state that you have waived the candidates and found me worthy of support.
All right. Well,
Great.
thank you very much for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
And this process will be in touch with you about how it'll happen.
Great. Well, good.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.